Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. Today we're going to be looking at Jadon Sancho and why he's an interesting pick in potential drafts right now. And the idea, conceptually is going to be dropping Bruno, going for one true premium in terms of Salah as a captaincy option because he has very good fixtures, I think, to start the season with. And then also managing to kind of flex your team to be able to get players like Son, Mahrez, and Robertson alongside Sancho, who seems to be a very tempting option at 9.5. And the first point of comparison I'm going to make for Sancho is going to be a direct comparison to Rashford, right? Rashford is someone who's at 9.5, and I think he deserved that off the back of his kind of 11 goal, 9 assist season. And ultimately, Rashford's kind of points were rather low when you compare it to some of the other premiums in this list, but those were still impacted, I think, by injury at times, and also the kind of fact that I think Man United probably we expect to trend a little bit higher this year. So it makes sense that Rashford was a bit poor in terms of comparing points wise, but still is up there, right, with the premiums around statistics on points per match per pound. So he's not absurdly overpriced, in my opinion. And when we compare it to Sancho, actually, Sancho is a player who does bring in more goals on average and more assists in particular. Assist is something where you can see by expected assists, he does much better than Rashford in. Even though Rashford has a great cross on him, I would say Sancho is someone who is much more lethal in terms of actually creating for other players. And you can see that just from if you've watched him play in the Champions League or just domestically in the Bundesliga, right? Some people, of course, think that there should be a Bundesliga tax applied to Sancho. And I somewhat agree with that, but also disagree because, first of all, the Bundesliga has four less games per season. And yes, whilst some players have struggled from coming over the Bundesliga, I think Sancho is someone who has a little bit of a different situation. He's somewhat similar to Foden, in my opinion, someone who played and dominated younger levels of English football and is now kind of returning home, as opposed to um, players like Werner and Havertz who are kind of enjoying their first season right abroad. And this is very different to Sancho, who's kind of returning home. For me, Sancho is someone who, when we compare, let's say, just by the raw numbers, I've kind of created and constructed like a kind of expected comparison versus Rashford, right? If he's supposed to bring in two more goals and five assists, and what I've done, of course, is average Sancho over the last 3 years. What we have to take into account is Sancho is a player who grew, I think, year on year every 3 years, or every year during his stint in Borussia Dortmund, and we can only expect more of that to come with Man United. And I think this Man United side is much more dominant and will be much more dominant than the Dortmund side. I think Dortmund struggled, over the course of the last 3 years in kind of securing second place, even Champions League last year. And simply put, I think Man United is a much stronger team in that kind of facet, especially with the new transfers coming in. So regardless, let's just kind of compare the raw numbers. 2 goals, that's roughly 10 points. 5 assists, we're talking 15 points. Um, for me, the main kind of difference is that now with the bonus coming in, I'm roughly projecting that to be an additional 5 points, right, compared to someone like Rashford. And then on a total basis, we're saying that's an additional 30 points per year. And over the course of the season, if I really take in the account of 38 games, which is the formula that I've kind of used here, we're adding a PPM buffer, a points per match buffer rather, of 0.79 to what Rashford produced last year. And that kind of immediately injects Sancho to roughly just behind Robertson on this list, which means that he is very healthily priced, in my opinion, and then puts himself in very good standing by being closer to players who are very good for value for money in terms of Son, Mahrez, and Robertson, but is also someone who's nailed on, right, when you compare it to Mahrez, and also probably is a way to actually get a Man United player because I think a lot of people are struggling not necessarily to get an additional Liverpool player. I'm not sure many people will be tripling up Robertson now, but it could be a potential, and I will actually showcase a draft with it. But this is a way to still maintain a Man United player whilst they have good fixtures, right? And kind of dropping Fernandes in that sense. So I think Sancho makes a lot of sense, and then he actually then gives you the ability to go into Son, right? If you have a draft with Salah, Son, and Fernandes, I think first of all, you're a bit crazy, but it just doesn't really work in terms of rounding out your team well, or at least in a healthy point of view, in my opinion. And for that reason, I think Sancho makes sense. And, I think Sancho is someone who can trend well this year and start off the season good. So for that reason, I think Sancho makes a lot of sense. So let's look at some of the potential drafts that we have with Sancho inside. The first kind of draft that I'm going to showcase is going to be a draft with Sancho in and also maintaining a three forward structure, so a 3-4-3. Brownhill, of course, is here. I think you would change Hoover from Wolves to I think one of the Norwich players potentially at a 4.0 option. I think his name is, if we just go quickly on fantasy, Omo Bamidele, I think from Norwich. He could be a much better option than Hoover. And you can actually then have a very strong bench in the sense that you have players who will be playing consecutive games, but then you get the structure where you have a huge upgrade in terms of Robertson, and then you get to use the full flexibility of the season where a lot of the forwards are very healthily priced, right? Perhaps you might disagree with going Watkins, but I still think the start of the season is very strong for Aston Villa, and you can still get that flexibility to go into Leicester, who haven't really done extremely well the preseason, and in my opinion is a team that really struggles without having James Justin, and then Barnes coming into the picture also takes away from potentially Iheanacho's minutes. In the structure, you also get to keep Meslier, which is huge because now you have an issue with Sanchez potentially being injured at the start of the season. You can kind of avoid that by going Meslier, and you still have two strong kind of 6.5 flexible options with Rafinha and Buendia. Those players can be downgraded potentially, but you have this kind of strong midfield where you still retain this Man United threat with the double up there, and you have the Liverpool double up. The only thing missing is potentially a Man City player, but in my opinion, I would actually avoid Man City to start the season for many reasons listed, and then Chambers can be someone who could be another 4.5 option. A more nailed on option for Arsenal, for example, would be someone like Ben White. But moving on, I think the second potential draft is kind of going for a much stronger and much deeper kind of 3-5-2, right? Once again, you can see Sanchez here, and unfortunately, this video was kind of filmed prior to his injury news. But I think you can actually create a team with maybe Bachmann instead from Watford, and then you can maybe replace Chambers with Veltman, and then once again, Hover can be replaced with Omo Bamidele, and then you can kind of look at what I've brought into the midfield table. I've actually brought Ben Rama into this team because I actually strongly favor going for an 8.0 and a 7.5 forward. I don't really like going for Tony this season, or to start the season at least. I kind of want to see how he performs with Brentford first. And I think Calvert-Lewin at that price still allows you to go into Bamford, who is going to be that kind of strong competing option at 8.0. And then Ben Rama is someone who I think is set to have a fantastic season at West Ham. So that will keep your midfield very, very strong. And then you can kind of either choose between Buendia and Rafinha. I think Rafinha probably makes more sense because there's a little bit of things up in the air with Aston Villa, with Bailey coming in, and then also the impact of maybe Grealish leaving. But ultimately, this draft is strong because you have now that kind of double trident of Son and Sancho behind Salah, right, who will be your strong captaincy option. And then I think Son is a little bit of conjecture at this point because, we have Nuno coming in, but I think he's had a strong preseason, and we can expect, a player of his level to continue having like a world-class season. I expect Son to have a great year, and I think this draft kind of allows that, right? Allows you to have these three premium midfielders while keeping a rather strong front line. But that's it for the video. Those are kind of my ideas with regards to Sancho. Let me know what you guys think overall. But otherwise, have a fantastic week. And we'll see you guys for the next video, which is probably going to be either rating your teams or an updated Game Week 1 draft.